Welcome back to the Next Level podcast. This is part of Freedom Church, and we're talking about relationships, talking about the power of all these different things, whether it's parenting, marriage, friendship, in church. And I've got our senior pastor with us again, Pastor G.
Hello, Dave. Come on, I'm excited.
Woohoo! Let's go. It was a great conversation we had last time, and we're going to jump into some of what you've been speaking into on Sundays. But before we do that, you got 5 boys.
I certainly have.
The world changes.
Yes.
Crazy wild men.
Characters.
All of them. And so I thought it would be great for us just to kick off. You tell so many stories. Like in this series, you talked about leaving Jordan at the airport. You know,
yes, that was my mistake. I know Heather exposed me on stage, but she said I'm always doing it to her. So
there you go, payback. But I'd love to hear a story we've never heard. You know, something about your parenting journey, raising the boys, something that we've never ever heard.
Yeah, it's hard to remember actually what you have heard. So I'm not sure if this is a story that people have heard, but it was perhaps a little bit more obscure. But it's about Jordan. And
come on, the best ones are about Jordan.
Well, when he was little, he was trying to raise some money. So he used to have his pocket money, always try to get the boys to, appreciate if you help around the home and do those chores, then you're going to get some money. You don't get money for free, but there's something about, I'm going to contribute here. So one of the things he came up with, because he wanted a little extra, was he said, "Dad, I could clean the car." And this was the first time he'd ever cleaned the car, and he had his bucket, and he said, "I'm going to, give it a good clean. How much would you give me?" And he was raising money for something noble. So I thought, all right, I'll give you £5, which is pretty good. Cheaper if I went to the car wash, but I'm doing a bit of a parent giving here. So off he went. Half an hour later, I saw him out there, and the car was covered in, bubbles, and I thought, wow, and it was a big sort of 7-seater car. So I was thinking, yeah, get him a money's worth here. So he's out there slaving away. And he then comes in, "Dad, I've finished, come and have a look at it." So went out to look at it, only to look into the bucket and realize that he'd taken the sponge from the washing up, those green Brillo things that you scrape your pans with.
The ones that you literally, you dig your elbow in with, the iron on the top.
Exactly. It's got this sort of scratchy, get the tough stuff off. He was going to do a good job on that car, but as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness. And as I looked at the car was scratched, every panel, every part, all over, complete. I mean, he didn't miss a bit.
He was thorough.
He scratched all the paintwork thoroughly.
Goodness.
And he stood there with this big smile and said, "Dad, are you pleased?" And I said, "What have you done, son?" And we had to sell that car because we couldn't recover it. It was a scratch car. No, it was the most expensive car wash I've ever had. But I, in fact, also paid him for that car wash because I just didn't have the heart to turn around and say, "What were you thinking of?" And that was just one of those little funny sort of things that happen in the middle of a crazy life.
Yeah, that's so you literally had to sell it.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't recover it. Oh my goodness.
Thorough job.
Well, hey, look, George's been doing a thorough job with things his whole life. He's now doing that, building the church. But absolutely fantastic. I think parenting, even though those stories, they can be frustrating, costly, even in a time. But parenting, one of the parts of the journey is you do have those just crazy memories. And you wouldn't want to not have had that. Well, maybe I'm looking at you going, maybe you would have, but it's one of those things, isn't it? Our life gets peppered with these things, these stories.
And we laugh about it today.
Yeah, come on. What was it like then, raising 5 boys? I've got 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy. And, raising daughters is an experience. Obviously, I've got a son as well. But what was it like raising 5 boys?
It was simply mad. Mad and wonderful.
Come on.
You had almost like these two sides of sometimes just thinking, are we going to survive this? Are we going to survive parenting and come through here? There were nights we went to bed and locked the door and thought we can't cope anymore. And then there were other times when we were out doing things with our boys that you just looked at each of them, the 5 of them, as precious gifts. And so you had this mad, can we cope? The wonderful, most blessed life to have these 5 boys that were such a treasure to us. And I think it was it really was incredible to be, you know, entrusted with those boys.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think every parent out there can identify with that those moments where you just don't know sometimes, because it pushes you to your edge, doesn't it? Parenting.
Yeah, there were. I mean, really, when you're in it, you don't. I think when you've had one, it's one thing. Two was a big jump because you got to think actually of two little people. But once you get past three,
you can just go.
It's gone. It's like you just like in there. You're in that crazy thing. We looked at a homemade video just recently of when they were all small, and we had a small little kitchen, and there was like 7 of us in this little and it was mad. The grabbing my one of them was grabbing my leg, another one was asking Heather for something, and then 3 people were talking, and I thought, man, I can't remember it. That it was that mad, but it was mad, and we came through. So parents out there,
keep
going. You're going to come through this, and one day look back and say we survived.
We were literally in the car the other day. So we got 4 kids. They're all under 9, and they were doing that thing where they just all were talking, and like one's trying to tell you about the thing they've learned, the other's literally screaming, the 2 are fighting, one wants to tell you, and me and Saz are literally having this deep heart to heart in the front of our car, and then we pause a moment, we're like, when did this become normal?
So true.
And we were literally like, this is the only time we have to talk. You just get used to it. But yeah, it's mad. I mean, you know, obviously within it, we understand that there's like struggles, but there's also like success. What for you as a parent, do you think, looking back, you're like, man, okay, there was lots that we struggle with, but this we did get right, or this is like our biggest success? What are some of those things? Because we can learn from our strengths or other people's strengths as much as from their weaknesses as well,
sure.
Can't we?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for us was we tried to make the most of everything we had. And, you know, we struggled. It's obviously expensive having 5 children, 5 little ones, all under 10 years old. And we, you know, I was doing business, we were running church. We did struggle. But so what we did is we became creative in creating adventure. And one of the things I look back on now, all of our boys love adventure today. All of our boys love being out, doing stuff, making things happen, always going somewhere. And I think it's that sort of, look, we're going to live life full and we're going to create adventure. Even if it's just going for walking in the woods and doing things that didn't cost us anything, but we created great memories, just going out, doing things together. I think that was something around the live full and die empty.
Come on.
You know, again, I'm precious about it because we wanted to really raise our boys saying, look, live life to the full. Don't live it just in a small box. Live life to the full. But we had to set that as an example as parents to say, we're always going to go. It's not about having the money. It's not about, you know, well, I can't do this, can't do that. We can't pay to go somewhere. Right. Sometimes we want like paid performance. We created entertainment ourselves. And we did some like most incredible things that we all remember and laugh about now. Yeah. And those are the things that I think was encouraging to say, look, always go. And then they repeat that even themselves now today. There
can be so many of us as parents that think, you know, one of the comments we get most with a larger family is, how do you afford it? Like, how do you afford it? But it's often that question is, well, how do you afford the concept of what you think you should have to do or provide? But actually it comes down to those simple things, isn't it?
Yeah,
it comes down to that adventure.
We never ever, and this would be advice to people, never decide on how many children you're going to have according to how much money you have.
Come on.
Because I hear people say, oh, we couldn't afford another one. In having our 5 boys, we never ever considered whether we could afford it. We had a vision for them. And in a way, we always found that God made a way for it. But I just hear people, well, we couldn't afford, you know, to have 3. We couldn't afford. Don't let that be the reason. There might be other reasons that are valid, but don't let money ever be a reason of saying, you know, we could only afford so many children. No, children, you know, there's something about you have vision for them. And somehow God makes a way and provides for them. Wow. And that's what he did for us.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. Vision making way for the capacity.
Yep.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, like, making the most of everything you did have, even in lack, was one of the biggest successes. What about one of the biggest struggles for you? What about, you know, what's like some of the most testing bit for you as a parent?
Yeah, at the very beginning, because I was, 20 years old when I had our first boy, it was just not knowing. And I think sometimes the first ones we're testing. We don't quite know. It doesn't matter what you've seen until you've had your own child and you're parent for the first time,
Yeah.
you're going to make mistakes. Now you want to limit the mistakes and hopefully not making too many mistakes. But I think looking back, there definitely was, I was learning. And with that, my firstborn, Josh, obviously he was the brunt of some of that, those mistakes. Yep. But then we started to learn and see how we could do things better. But the other thing was leading busy lives. If you lead lives full of vision, you're always going to have full lives. Mm-hmm. And it means that you're going to perhaps sometimes live a life like 3 lives in one. And that's how Heather and I will often say, it just feels like we've lived 3 lives because we've just had full lives and we decided to do that. So with it, it means that you have to be very well organized. Otherwise, you end up not having time for things that are precious. Mm-hmm. And when I look back, that was the hard balance. That was the challenge, was I was running a business, so I worked all different hours. And I missed out because I had to work. That was the income. But I missed out on more than I would have hoped for the boys. Mm-hmm. Heather was left often. She was left with the 5 boys. She was left to put them to bed, quite often. She was left on Saturdays when I had to go to work. It was, we didn't have that privilege. And I think we struggled to have the amount of time we wanted. So we tried to correct that as soon as we could. And when we did have time, we made the most of it. We made sure it was a quality time with the boys. And it was then, obviously, we had church as well, and that commitment, 5 boys, business. It was, it was a busy life. And I think that was probably one of the areas that I think I struggled with, was making sure that I gave each of these 5 boys individual time. And noticing, noticing those days they'd come home from school and some things weren't right. Sometimes I was just trying to get through the day and deal with things, and sometimes I wasn't always there. And I just want to be transparent about that. In those early days, it was difficult because of all those pressures. And trying to have the energy to be able to sort of be the best dad I could for them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to that as a dad, as a man. In the current stage of life, I'm out working full time. My wife is working part time, and I, even like last year was a massive year for me where I realized how not present I can be with my kids, often because I'm in my head.
Yes, and
I know for me, like one of the things I've started to try and do is like dinner time, like 5:30. Like I've got to be switched off so that I can be present. And I found like, not booking in meetings late at work, it means it helps me be more present. Is there anything that you look back and you think, okay, when I started to do that, it helped me break through that?
Yeah, I started to recognize that I couldn't allow one thing to bleed into the other thing. So because owning your own business, you're almost on 24/7.
Right.
And and if you don't do the work, you could lose your house, you could lose what you have. So there is a big motivation. You have to keep working. You can't just say, well, I'm going to get paid anyway. No, you don't. You have to sometimes put all the work in, and you can bring that home, the frustrations, the difficulty, the problem customer, although you can bring it home and you can be bad-tempered dad. And very quickly on, God said, are you going to bring that home and put it upon your boys? And he said, you're going to need to learn to put on a different hat. And I just had this picture of having different hats. Same with church. Is we love building church. We love doing what we did, but we weren't prepared to let it invade and grab in the negative sense. We didn't want it to come in, whether that's work or church, and almost rob the time. And the boys were sat there perhaps listening to us talking about something that was consumed by something within the time that we'd allotted for them. That no, this is our time. And we protected that.
That's so good.
We protected it. We protected that within our marriage, because it works the same way within marriage. You protect your date night and your intimacy. You don't let those things bleed in. So it's putting one hat on, saying, I'm not going to pick this up till tomorrow morning because I can't do anything about it. So it's a discipline of the mind. That takes practice. It doesn't just come. And again, if someone's listening and just feeling convicted about that, you can do it, but you have to train within it. It doesn't just happen. Don't give up within like 3 months. You got to train of how you can switch off from one thing so you're fully present in the moment.
Right. Yeah. I think it's so good. And I think even what you're saying there about marriage, I know for us, like sometimes it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30 when we're getting into our bedroom. And that's the first time we've had a chance to talk about the day. And we quickly realize that on the one hand, yes, we need to talk about the day, but we don't need to talk about the day now, especially when it's a pastoral thing or a negative, like,
Great discipline and wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying. We're trying, and we get it right and we get it wrong. And I think one of the things for us, I'm interested to know from you, G, is like, there's certainly times where we don't get the balance right. You know, like even when I'm saying like, okay, I come home from work and maybe Saz has particularly been having that responsibility with the kids. Like, how did you and Heather find the balance of parenting as a couple, you know, with some of those demands being different? What kind of things did you do to help find that balance and work together, I guess, keep that unity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly blessed with Heather. She is, some people have said she's one of the most laid back people there is. You know, she's not someone, everyone's different, but she is not someone that stresses and the rest of it. And she will take weight on, and she will, you know, sometimes you can't always tell. So it was important that we had good communication.
Right.
And Heather enabled me really to have the capacity that I had, because she didn't put the demands on me. But at the same time, she was the one that would also say, do you know what? You haven't spent that time. You haven't. There was honest conversation.
That's so powerful.
There was honest challenge. And she would be, sometimes I wouldn't see it. And I would guess some men would be like this. When your head is down, you're doing this stuff. You can even be, well, I got home early. But if you're not present, or if you're not engaging, and if you're not switching off and you're grumpy or the rest of it, it's like, hey, that's not helpful. Well, she would be able to tell, and she'd call it out.
Come on.
She'd be this incredible support, but she would also speak to me about it and say, look, tell me what's going on. How come you just don't seem, is everything all right? But she always did have a place of concern to help me get to that place, rather than condemnation. I think it's really interesting is that she would not make me feel bad about it, but she would raise it. And she'd also do it at the right time, not out of a reaction, but sometimes it'd be when the kids went to bed and we just had a chance, and you just say, look, are you okay? I noticed this.
Wow.
And what do you think we can do? What about this Saturday? We've actually got, we've got an afternoon off. What should we do about getting time? We need some time. And I think for husbands, let's not be insecure reacting, because that's what we do. Is like, do you know what I've got to do? I've got this on.
Yeah.
Now you're demanding more. We all listen to our wives, because I think they have such wisdom. There is safety there. There's something about accountability, especially if they're bringing it in a support and loving way, not a critical or comparison way.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there about how H would come and bring a solution option as well.
Yes.
Like, you know, saying like, I've noticed this, I've seen this. Ultimately, it's like, I'm challenging this, but hey, what about this Saturday? I think that is such wise, because, you know, so often when you come and reflect somebody to somebody, if you don't bring either faith in them that they can change, or like options to empower them to change, that's sometimes why we react, because we feel like, oh, you're just saying this and I don't know where to go. But if it's like, if you spot something in your partner, whether it's the wife to the husband, husband to the wife, you know, whichever way around, it's coming with that faith and compassion and conviction rather than condemnation and comparison.
Yes.
And an option, like, because that's so much more empowering, isn't it?
Even simply by using the word, what can we do?
Oh,
when we use the word we rather than you are failing, because that's what, you know, men, we tend to hear criticism, you know, even if it's constructive, as you failed. And you're failing at this, and you're not meeting the standard, and we react and get. But in fact, when we start using the words, look, what can we do? What can we do to see change here? What's our vision? So it's we are, and it works both ways. You know, as we support 100%. One another, we're in this together. It's not a you and I thing.
What did you do to make sure that you created space for H, even though you had such a huge demand of workload and she had a huge demand of childbearing, you know, raising the boys in those early years?
Yeah, Heather was she related to people. Like her big thing was just she connected with people. Many of you will know that we started building church 2 years after our firstborn. So we were building church all those early years of having children. So one of the things that she did was she ran a mums and toddlers group for something like 19 years.
Wow. Because
she was always around children, but it wasn't just children. She wanted to reach other parents, and she had single dads come, and she had, but majority was mums that came that she connected. And in that town that we planted church in, she just, where she came alive was in relating to people.
Right.
and not, obviously being stuck at home. I think that would have killed her. So when she had vision around these things and she had vision around all sorts of things, but it was always to do with people.
Right.
She is an evangelist, so she will always want to connect, and she gets life from being around people. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was ensuring that somehow we could find a way of releasing that, supporting it, facilitating it, right? What's the vision? How can we see this work? How can we support you in this? How can I, step in to do something to fire you into that? And that's how I think those were definitely signs that, we saw God move in incredible ways.
So good. So I guess, point to anybody who is, going out to work and maybe your partner is holding down a lot of the childcare in this season of life. Be conscious of how you can make space, facilitate, release kind of things. So
yeah, one of the things I also did was there was an importance for me about communication, because sometimes when we come home and you're involved in so much, we can very easily, again, I'm speaking on behalf of men, we can just switch off.
I'm terrible at this.
Because we just think, right, that's done. And this is different. So you've got this thing of switching off, hat off, that's work. But there are essential like communication and conversation, especially if you have, say, a parent who is at home,
right,
for days after days, and perhaps seeing people, but they want some adult company in that sense.
So
and I think you don't want to just be coming home and having tea and maybe flicking on the telly and having limited conversation. We committed to quality conversation, communication. So it's something that I always made sure I focused on with Heather, was that I'm going to talk to you, might not necessarily about problems at work, but I'm going to talk to you about, hey, this funny thing happened today.
Come on.
I met this person. I had this chance to share, my story today. And there's something in this, person that I met. I think we might have him around for dinner. So there was something about always communication of what was happening, and that around vision, life, things that we did. I always made sure I heavily communicated to Heather. And I did that intentionally because then she felt that she was very much part of the bigger life, not I'm a mum at home doing this and I just go to school every day to pick up the kids. That's so the important thing.
So good. So just as we finish out, parenting is about sowing, isn't it? It's like you raise and you sow into your children. And just finishing up, what are some of the things that you guys really sowed into your children that you see as bearing fruit now, that you'd say to any parent, like, make sure you sow this in this season, in these early years?
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen within them is, I think, the individuality that they have.
Right.
Now you can think, well, yeah, everyone's individual, but when it's really rich and full, because we can so easily group them together, especially in large families, right? The boys, the 5 boys.
Yeah.
But when I see each of them, who they're discovering more and more who they are. They're finding confidence in who they are without comparison to their brothers. That individuality is something that I feel is a celebration, because we're charged with that. It's like, bring out who they are, bring out those God colors within them. And I think there's something powerful about seeing that's them. That's their individuality. The other thing is obviously the way they love God.
Right.
You can't make people love God, can't make your kids love God, but when they love God and have this relationship with him, that is something. What
did you sow into them, or what did you do that helped them do that? Because like you said, you couldn't make them do it, but you could give them the best chance of it. What did you sow into them?
We set a culture around our home that we always gave thanks to God.
Right.
So there was gratitude around God is the reason why we lived this life, while we have this chance to have this family, our health, all these things. We also, we sat around the table and used to have breakfast together, and I would just read something from the Bible.
Right.
And it sounds old school, but it is just bringing them all back to this place. We'd have prayers, we'd have breakfast before they all went off to school. And there was just something about focusing the family.
Making it normal as well.
Making it normal. They enjoyed that time. They enjoyed, and we had family nights where we made sure we always had one night a week that was our family night, and they could get to choose what we would do.
Right.
So we would say, no one interferes with that. That's our night, and we can do some fun things. But within it, you see, God was part of it. It wasn't something, you didn't go to church and suddenly it was the Christian bit. No, God was in our lives.
Every
and what
week.
we also
Come
did is
on.
we celebrated things. So if something happened and there was a story of life change or a story of maybe answered prayer, we would change it. We would share it, and then we would put that down to God being the reason. So there was
good.
always something about, no, this is because of God. This is because he loves us. And so we would use it, again, with considered communication. It was always a wise communication of the right things. Not, sometimes you say, oh, what isn't working? And we're frustrated with this. But no, it was focusing on the good, that God is kind, that he is doing amazing things in our life. So that's how we did that. And then lastly, the thing that we've seen, I think, grow is just the way they love others.
Right.
Each of them have a love and compassion for others, all expressed in different ways. But they love people and they impact people's lives. And I think to see that go on, that they're impacting people's lives. I just heard one of my boys who's just returned come back and just say about someone he said goodbye to who'd been homeless, and he's now seen him get accommodation, and he's worked with him and supported him. And he turned around and he said, look, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for you.
Wow.
He said it was those months of care and support that has given me hope to live. And he's now left there, but this guy said, that was because, you cared for me. And I think that, as a parent, to be able to see your kids impart that to others, that for me is from the seeds that we said, look, we're going to sow this in the heart of God about loving him and loving others.
Come on, that's so good. That's so good. So this week, today, if you are a parent, how can you sow into your kids so that it reaps these kind of things you want to see when they get older? Thank you so much for joining us. Come and join us on the next one.
Thank you, guys.